Hey, what's up guys? It's Ryan. Thank you for being here. Another video today. I wanted to answer a question I got and I figure I would answer it in this video. I'm here at the streaming setup, so it's a little different today than the channel sometimes looks. So the question I got was, what is the smallest full frame camera? That's interesting to me because if you followed the channel before, you know that a couple years ago, I sold my full frame stuff. I was just tired of the bulk and the size, and I wanted to just go smaller with everything. And ever since then, that has been the goal with me. I used to be one of those guys who wanted to rig stuff out and make it big because it looks awesome, right? It's always cool to have an awesome rig. And I do still have some rigs, but it's more for the functionality. If I need a cage and I need a monitor on it, you know, that's a whole different thing. I'll rig up my Blackmagic. In fact, I've got a video about that coming up too. But this is something that's near and dear to me after I try to go a little more minimalist with my gear, especially when taking photos or just doing simple handheld videos. I wanted small stuff. So when someone asked me what the smallest full frame cameras were, they came right to mind because I'm always looking at cameras. I love minimalist gear. So I'll go through them briefly. You can see what you like, which ones appeal to you. But I think off the top of my head, there are three cameras that are full frame and small that I think of right away. And the great thing is they're all very different from one another. So the first really small camera that I thought of is the Sony A7C. The Sony A7C is a great camera. It's basically the A7 III rewrapped in a body that looks more like Sony's APS-C line. Looks more like an A6000 or a 61, 6400, whatever. But it's got a full frame sensor. It's got great autofocus. It shoots really crispy downsampled 4K video. So it takes a bigger file, brings it down to 4K, which makes it super crispy and clear, great 4K. It is only 8-bit video, if that matters to you. It doesn't matter a lot to me when I make stuff for YouTube or stuff that's going to be compressed. But, you know, 10-bit has its advantages for gradients of color and light and gradients in the sky. You might want 10-bit, then this is not the camera for you. But as an all-around hybrid, I think it's a really great camera. Some of the downsides, people don't like the viewfinder because it's not as big and beautiful as some viewfinders, but it has a viewfinder. It's super small. It's interchangeable lens. You can put all different Sony FE lenses on it. You can attach any vintage lens. It's just got all the features that I like about Sony mirrorless in a nice small package. The second tiny full frame camera that I want to talk about is completely different from the first one I mentioned, and that is the Sigma FP. There's two versions now. There's a Sigma FP, there's a Sigma FPL, which is basically a higher megapixel camera, but I'll just generally talk about the FP. The Sigma FP is a tiny little camera. It's almost a box camera, and there's no EVF, and it's meant to be used however you want to use it. It's got a stills mode and then a switch to switch it over to cine mode. To keep those modes separate. And what's great about the Sigma FP, not only is it a full frame camera that can take beautiful 24 megapixel full frame photos, and I've heard great things about it. I've seen some examples. The pictures are beautiful coming out of it. It also shoots cinema DNG Raw, which is super interesting. Now it can shoot up to, I think, 8-bit RAW in the camera on an SD card, or it can shoot to an external drive. I don't want to misquote this, but 12-bit RAW or something. And Cinema DNG RAW is what the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera used to shoot, or does shoot, I should say. Now they use B-RAW and the 4K and the 6K and everything. But this is the original Cinema DNG RAW. You can basically post-process it like a photo. You bring it open and you've got all your sliders. You can do it in Lightroom. You could do it in DaVinci Resolve, but you can grade this raw footage beautifully. So it was super interesting that this full frame little box camera came out and it shoots Cinema DNG Raw. So even though I would say it's kind of skewed towards filmmakers in the sense that you can use it as a director's viewfinder, you can use it to shoot Cinema DNG Raw, you could rig it out into a big cinema camera, which kind of defeats the purpose of a tiny little camera. But you can use it as just a little camera, and you can take great full frame stills. Like I said, you can adapt a bunch of different lenses onto it. It doesn't have IBIS, which the Sony A7C at least does. It's debatable how good the IBIS is, but the Sigma FP does not. So you may want to find a stabilized lens from Panasonic or one of the L-mount lenses. Or if you're a cinematographer, you may be used to not using IBIS at all. So you may just rig it up. You may put it on some sort of Steadicam or something like that. But a totally interesting option from Sigma in the tiny full frame landscape as well. Now, the third camera that came to mind was also a Sony, but this one's way different than the Sony A7C, and that's because this is the Sony RX1. Now, there's a few iterations of this one as well. There's the RX1, the RX1R, and the RX1R2. They all look the same. They're all a little different, but it's a tiny fixed lens full frame camera. 24 megapixels for the Sony RX1. You can usually find them for around $800, maybe $900, and then the 1R and the 1R2 are incrementally more expensive. I think the biggest difference in the Sony RX1R2, it's the same sensor, I do believe, as the Sony A7R2. So it's got a lot of megapixels, and that one, the third iteration, has a pop-up EVF, which is super nice. The other two do not have an EVF, but it's a great little camera. It takes great photos, and as long as you're okay with a fixed 35mm lens, made by Zeiss, a beautiful lens, then that's a great option too. So that was 3 tiny full-frame cameras that came to mind when I was asked about small full-frame cameras. There's a few more that are small that may be interesting to you. The original A7 is very small. The original Sony A7S is very small. I've heard the Canon RP is very small. I have not tested that camera. So if you have any other ideas for small full-frame cameras, if someone wants to keep their rig small and minimalist and just have something to carry around or slip in a jacket pocket, let me know in the comments. As always, thanks for coming to my channel. Please hang out with me more. I'll see you real soon. I appreciate you. Bye-bye.